Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
There was something weirdly comforting about the way Jake smiled when he talked, like you were in on some secret that no one else got. We met at a rooftop bar in the city during one of those post-work mixers that my friend practically dragged me to. The kind where everyone's pretending not to be on dating apps while scanning the room for someone who looks like they might own a dog and have decent credit. I wasn't expecting anything serious. I mean, who meets someone normal at a networking event with craft cocktails and a DJ? But there he was. Tall, confident, one of those people who seemed like they knew how to fold a fitted sheet. You know the type. We started talking about podcasts, of all things. He mentioned one on psychology, and I pretended I knew it just so the conversation wouldn't stall, then ended up actually listening to it the next day. He was smart, funny, and didn't try too hard. That's rare. Most guys in the city either act like they're auditioning for a reality show or talk like LinkedIn posts. Jake didn't. He felt real. Our first date was this indie film in a tiny theater downtown. You had to go through an alley to find the entrance, which felt sketchy at first, but then you walk in and it's all exposed brick and soft lighting and overpriced popcorn. He brought me flowers, not roses or anything cliche, just a small bouquet of daisies wrapped in brown paper. Said they reminded him of summer, and I just stood there, low-key stunned, like, okay, maybe I was wrong about the dating scene here. We went out a few more times after that. Museums, bookstores, even this random farmer's market where he insisted on buying peaches because they smelled like childhood. He always had some poetic crap like that, but it worked. I started getting used to the idea of him being around. He'd text me good morning, send me memes in the middle of the day, and tell me when something reminded him of me. It felt like something was actually building, like we were both leaning in. But then this weird thing happened. We were at this small outdoor concert, nothing big, just some local band and a lot of fairy lights. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of us. Nothing fancy, just one of those blurry but cute selfies to post on my story. He leaned in and smiled, and I thought this is going to be one of those memories I come back to. Until he reached over and lowered my phone gently and said super casually that I shouldn't post it. At first, I thought it was just one of those privacy things. Some people are weird about social media, right? But then he followed it up with this weird pause and told me he was actually engaged. Not like we broke up and it's complicated. No. Full on still engaged. As in, there's a ring, there's a long distance fiancé living in another state. And I guess I was just part of whatever emotional buffet he had going on while she was away. He said he used Tinder when he was feeling lonely. Like that made it better. Like we were both part of some sad little self-help exercise he was doing without her knowing. And he said he thought I'd understand. Like a nod and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, carry on. The way he said it too. Like it wasn't a big deal. Like being someone's secret side story was just supposed to be okay with me. I didn't say much that night. I just sat there listening while the music played and people danced around us. I remember there was this couple next to us slow dancing, even though it wasn't that kind of concert. The girl had glitter on her cheeks and was wearing a bandana like a headband. And I remember wondering what kind of world she thought she was in. Probably one where the guy she was with wasn't hiding a fiancé across the country. Jake walked me home that night like nothing had changed. He still tried to hold my hand. I let him, not because I forgave him, but because I didn't know what to say. I think I was still trying to figure out if I'd imagined it all, if I somehow misunderstood. But I hadn't. The next morning, I woke up to a message from him that said, "Had a great time. Hope you're okay with keeping us private," like we were some kind of startup in stealth mode. After that, I stopped replying. I didn't block him right away, though. I wanted to see if he'd say anything else. He didn't, just kept reacting to my stories with fire emojis. And "you look amazing" comments like he wasn't actively betraying someone who probably had his photo as her phone background. The whole thing made me feel weirdly hollow, like I'd been reading a book and suddenly realized half the pages were missing. I thought about messaging his fiancée, but I didn't know her name or where she lived or even if she'd believe me. And I didn't want to be dragged into whatever mess he created. So I just let it drop. I still see guys like Jake sometimes. The ones who come off like they got it all figured out. Good job, thoughtful texts, some hobby like photography or cooking they throw into conversation like a charm spell. But now I know better. I listen harder. I watch for the cracks. And if someone ever tells me not to post a photo of us together, I don't ask why anymore. I already know. She messaged me first, which almost never happens. Her profile was confident without trying too hard. Just a couple of decent travel pics, one blurry one at a probe test, and a bio that said feminist, foodie, future CEO. I liked the vibe. We had some mutual interests: film, politics, hiking, so I figured why not? I replied. Her name was Fatima. We started talking, and right away the energy was good. She had that sharp sense of humor that makes you think twice before replying, just to make sure you don't sound like a moron. We met up at a brunch spot that felt a bit too fancy for a first date, but she suggested it, and I didn't want to seem cheap. One of those minimalist places where everything's served on wooden boards, and no one knows how to smile unless it's for a story post. She showed up in heels, all polished like she'd just come from a photo shoot or a TED Talk. I was wearing Vans and a t-shirt with a half-washed-out band logo. Already I felt like I was in the wrong room. The conversation started off strong. She talked a lot about her job, how she was climbing the ladder at some marketing agency. It was cool at first, hearing someone be so passionate about what they do, but after a while, I noticed something kind of strange. Whenever I tried to talk about myself, she'd cut me off or make some sideways comment. Like I mentioned that I used to work at a startup, and she said, "Oh, you don't look like the founder type," whatever that means. I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe she was nervous or trying to be funny. But then she started poking at my height. I'm 5'9", not tall, but I've never really had issues with it. She made this comment about how she only dated guys who could pass for CEOs, and laughed when I asked what that meant. I thought she was joking until she followed it up with short guys give me little brother vibes. It wasn't even subtle. She kept going. Said I seemed sweet, but I didn't carry alpha energy. Whatever image she had in her head of a man, I clearly wasn't it. But she also wouldn't stop texting me. She'd send messages late at night, random memes, voice notes of her venting about her coworkers. I kept responding because I wasn't sure where things were going, and sometimes she did seem cool. We even met a few more times. That's when the mixed signals got weirder. One minute she'd talk about dismantling toxic masculinity, and the next she'd call me too soft, because I said I liked journaling. She had a lot of strong opinions about men being emotionally unavailable, but also seemed disgusted if I was vulnerable about anything. It was like she wanted this perfect mix of caveman and therapist, and anything outside that box made me just another trash man. The last straw was this night we were out grabbing drinks at this loud, crowded bar with those neon signs trying too hard to be Instagrammable. She ordered 3 different cocktails and barely touched them, then started ranting about how all men were selfish and that she was only dating because she was bored. I tried to lighten the mood with a joke, and she looked me dead in the face and said, "You're lucky I'm even here with you. You're not tall, not rich, not powerful. Be honest. What do you actually bring to the table?" Something snapped in me. I didn't even get mad at first. I just laughed because it was so absurd. I'd never talked to someone so obsessed with this imaginary list of requirements. Like she was interviewing people for some CEO husband starter pack. That's when I said, without even thinking, you're not exactly the tallest or slimmest person either. You keep talking about standards, maybe try meeting your own. She went quiet for like half a second, then called me a misogynist and said I was proving her point. Said this is why she doesn't date white men, and that I was just another trash guy who couldn't handle a strong woman. The way she flipped the whole thing on me was kind of impressive in a twisted way, like she'd already rehearsed how it would go the second anyone pushed back. I paid the bill and left. Didn't even say goodbye. She blocked me the next day, but not before sending one last voice note accusing me of being emotionally manipulative and weaponizing insecurity. I didn't even respond. What was there to say? I think what threw me off the most was how someone could say all the right words: feminism, emotional intelligence, progressive values, and still act like dating was a high-stakes casting call. Like she built this character in her head, and if you didn't fit the mold, she'd just throw the whole script at you. It wasn't even about connecting. It was about winning something. I told my friends about it later, and they just shook their heads like, "Dude, you should have bounced after the hike comment." But it's not always that easy. Sometimes it takes a few jabs before you realize you're being boxed into something you never signed up for. Honestly, I hope she figures it out someday. Not for me. I'm way past caring. but because living like that must be exhausting. Constantly measuring people, constantly measuring yourself, constantly looking for someone who doesn't exist. Anyway, I deleted her number, unfollowed her on everything, and went back to regular brunch spots with normal chairs and pancakes that come on actual plates. And next time someone tells me they're a feminist, I'm not going to assume we're on the same page. I'll wait to see how they treat people first, because talk is cheap, especially over cocktails you don't even finish. It started with a playlist. I posted a screenshot of what I was listening to on my story. Some old school R&B, nothing too deep, and Ty replied with a fire emoji, and this song is criminally underrated. That's literally all it took. We started talking in DMs about music, then movies, then food. It was one of those flows that felt easy, like you've already known the person for a while. We talked late into the night for a few days before we even brought up meeting in real life. He had this chill, confident energy. Not fake smooth, just like he knew who he was and didn't need to prove anything. Our first date was at this food truck park, which honestly was perfect. It wasn't loud, it wasn't formal, and you could tell a lot about someone by what they ordered and how messy they let themselves get. He got tacos and didn't care when the sauce spilled a little on his jeans. I liked that. I got Thai and we ended up sitting on the curb, laughing over which spice level counted as medium, because clearly my mouth was on fire and he was acting like it was no big deal. After that, we hung out a few more times. Coffee shop dates, random walks through the park, a late night burger run where we ate in his car and talked for hours. I started to feel like maybe this one was different. He was honest about stuff. Told me about a bad breakup from last year, about how he was trying to be more mindful with who he let into his life. He asked real questions too, not just what's your favorite color, but stuff like what made me feel safe, what kind of future I saw for myself, what scared me most about love. It caught me off guard in a good way. One night, he invited me over to watch a movie. He didn't live far, maybe 20 minutes across town. I remember being excited like this was going to be a new layer of knowing him. His place was in a nice complex, clean, quiet, one of those with a coded gate. He buzzed me in, and I followed the little map signs to the building he mentioned. When I got to the door, he opened it halfway and stepped out like he was trying to block the view behind him. I thought maybe his place was messy or something. He gave this awkward laugh and said something about his roommate being a little all over the place. I didn't think much of it. People have roommates. It's expensive out here. I walked in trying to be polite, but as soon as I stepped inside, I felt this weird tension. The apartment was clean, but it had this half-lived-in vibe. You know when something's too neat, like it's staged or temporary. There was a candle burning in the kitchen, soft music playing. Everything looked curated. But then I noticed some pink fuzzy slippers near the couch, a pair of sunglasses that definitely weren't his. I didn't say anything at first. Maybe he had a female roommate. Cool, not unheard of. But then a voice came from the hallway, a woman, asking if he'd seen her charger. I just stood there, completely still. She walked into the room holding her phone, looked at me, then looked at him like she wasn't sure what was happening. I froze. Tan's whole body language shifted. He stepped toward her real fast and said, "Oh, this is my friend," with this tight smile that looked like it hurt his face. I didn't say anything. I was trying to figure out what kind of roommate situation this was because it didn't feel like one. She didn't even flinch. She just nodded and walked back into the hallway like this kind of thing wasn't new to her. After she was gone, he sighed and sat down on the edge of the couch like someone had hit pause on his whole life. Then he said the words that made everything click. "Yeah, so that's my ex. We still live together, but it's not like that. We're just roommates now." I didn't know what to do with that. I sat down across from him and tried to keep my voice level. He went into this whole explanation about how they broke up a few months ago, how neither of them could afford to move out just yet, how they had an agreement, how they were both doing their own thing now. He talked fast, like if he just said enough words, it would make it okay. I asked him if she knew he was dating again. He hesitated. Then he said, "Not really." I didn't even know what that meant. Not really. Either she knows or she doesn't. And based on her face when she saw me, she definitely didn't. He tried to spin it, saying it wasn't serious, that he didn't think he needed to explain everything yet, that he didn't want to create drama in a situation that was already fragile. Said he didn't want to blow things up before they were stable. I didn't know whether to laugh or leave. The way he framed it made it sound like it was some temporary secret he could stash away while waiting for his living situation to magically sort itself out. But the thing is, everything up until that moment had felt so real. And that's what pissed me off the most. Because now I didn't know how much of it was actually real and how much of it was just a performance for a chapter he wasn't done writing. I left that night without saying much. He walked me out to my car, tried to hug me, but I just got in and drove off. My mind was going in circles the whole way home. I didn't text him the next day, or the day after. He eventually messaged me saying he understood if I needed space and that he hoped we could still talk. I left him on read. I think what hit the hardest was that I genuinely liked him. I wanted to believe in what we had, but I can't be the side character in someone else's unfinished story, especially not when they pretend like everything's fine while leaving doors wide open behind them. So now I double check. I ask harder questions. I pay attention to what people don't say, not just what they do. And if I ever walk into someone's place and it smells like secrets, I don't stick around. I already know how that one ends. It was a Tuesday afternoon when we matched, which already felt weird because most matches come in late at night when everyone's just swiping out of boredom. But Samira's profile actually stood out. It wasn't the usual blurry mirror selfies or filtered pictures from 2017. She had these clear, bright photos like she genuinely enjoyed life. There was one of her in a field of sunflowers, another on a hiking trail with her hair tied back and no makeup, and one at a dinner table laughing with a glass of wine in her hand. It gave the vibe that she was fun, grounded, and actually had a personality beyond love tacos and traveling. We started chatting, and right away it just clicked. Her messages were thoughtful, not just surface-level stuff. She made fun of one of my playlist names, then recommended a bunch of songs that turned out to be fire. She was into indie films, street food, and somehow knew way more than I did about basketball stats. That was impressive. After a couple days of texting, we decided to meet up for coffee at this little shop that doubled as a bookstore. She said she loved places with a mood, and this one had that quiet, cozy energy with too many plants and old jazz playing in the background. She walked in wearing this oversized sweater and hoop earrings, and I swear the whole room shifted for a second. She smiled like she already knew this was going to go well, and honestly, it did. We sat in the back by a window and talked until the sun went down. I remember thinking she had the kind of energy that made time feel weird. Like it wasn't just a date. It felt like I was reconnecting with someone I hadn't seen in a long time, even though we just met. After that, we went on 2 more dates that week. One was a late night walk where we just wandered around the city sharing stories. The other was dinner at this hole-in-the-wall place she swore had the best Ethiopian food in town. I remember thinking, okay, this is different. There was no weird posturing, no awkward silences, no checking phones under the table. It felt like 2 people who just enjoyed being in the same space. So when she invited me over to her place for a movie night, I said yes without hesitation. She gave me the address, and I stopped to grab snacks on the way. I pulled up to a small apartment complex. Not fancy, but clean and kind of homey. I texted her that I was outside, and a minute later she opened the door, but she wasn't alone. There was a little girl standing next to her. For a second I froze, thinking maybe it was her niece or a younger sibling. But Samira just smiled like this was totally normal and said, "Hope you don't mind, I couldn't find a sitter tonight." Then she turned around and walked back in like this was the plan all along. I stood there holding a bag of popcorn and a 6-pack, trying to make sense of what was happening. I followed her inside. Her daughter, then I'd figured out that's who it was maybe 4 or 5, wearing a princess dress and watching cartoons on a tablet. The apartment was clean but clearly lived in. Toys in the corner, little shoes by the door, baby wipes on the coffee table. Samira looked back at me, smiling, and said, "She'll be occupied. Don't worry. Come sit." I sat, but I wasn't really there. I was trying to process the fact that she never mentioned having a kid. Not once. Not in her profile, not in our messages, not on any of our dates. I didn't know what to say, and I think she picked up on it because she suddenly switched tones and started explaining everything. She told me she didn't put it in her profile because people judge, that it's hard enough being a single mom without being immediately written off. She said she wanted people to get to know her before dropping that kind of info, which I sort of understood, but also didn't. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. She went on about how most guys disappear the second they hear the word kid, so she tries to ease him into it. Except this didn't feel like easing. It felt like a trap. Then came the part that really threw me. She said, kind of casually, I don't expect you to be a dad or anything. I just need someone supportive. Daycare's expensive, and if we keep seeing each other, I'd probably need a little help with that. Just like that. Like she was asking if I could hold her purse for a second, not drop a few $100s a month so she could get to work on time. I didn't even know how to react. We weren't exclusive. We'd known each other for, 2 weeks. I was still learning her favorite food, and she was already pitching me financial responsibilities. I'm not against dating someone with a kid. People have lives, things happen. But there's a huge difference between I want you to know this about me, and here's what I need from you now. The rest of the night was awkward. I couldn't focus on the movie. The kid kept popping in and out of the room, asking for snacks or attention, and Samira acted like everything was normal. Like this was all going according to some silent plan she'd been building in her head. I left before the credits rolled. I told her I had an early morning, but really I just needed to breathe. The next day she texted me a long message about how she'd hoped I wasn't overwhelmed, that she could tell we had something special, and that it was hard finding someone mature enough to step up. I stared at my phone for a while before deciding not to reply. I didn't ghost her completely, but I told her I didn't think we were on the same page. She read it and never answered. I kept thinking about how easy it is to fall for a version of someone before you know the full story, and how some people will wait until you're already emotionally invested before dropping the real script. It didn't feel fair. Not because she had a kid, but because she didn't trust me enough to be honest from the start. Now when I meet someone new, I ask more questions. I listen harder. Not to catch them in a lie, but to catch the parts they're leaving out. Because sometimes the silence says more than the words. I've met Ben during that awkward time of year when it's not really cold anymore, but still not warm enough to go outside without a jacket. I've been off dating apps for a bit, just trying to reset, but then I got bored one rainy weekend and re-downloaded the usual suspects. He popped up on my screen, and I almost swiped left because his first photo was one of those gym mirror selfies, but something about the caption made me pause. It said, "Recovering situationship survivor, just looking for good sushi and better vibes." I rolled my eyes but swiped right anyway. We matched instantly. His messages were funny, like actually funny, not just dry sarcasm pretending to be personality. He didn't waste time with small talk either. Within minutes, we were deep in a conversation about what the perfect first date would look like. He said something about rollerblading and milkshakes, which made no sense but somehow felt charming in that chaotic, spontaneous kind of way. We ended up meeting at a taco joint that had outdoor seating and questionable lighting. He showed up in a hoodie and joggers, but somehow still managed to look put together. He had this easy confidence, like he could talk to anyone and make them feel interesting. And he did. He asked questions that made me pause, made me think. It didn't feel like a date. It felt like hanging out with someone I'd known since high school, except without the awkward memories. Over the next couple weeks, we saw each other a lot. Way more than I was used to. I usually keep people at a bit of a distance at first, but Ben had this way of pulling you in without even trying. He'd send voice notes instead of texts, show up with my favorite snacks, and remember little things I didn't even realize I'd told him. One night he made me a playlist called For When the World's Too Loud, and it actually made me tear up a little. I felt safe with him, which should have been my first red flag, honestly, because no one should feel asterisk safe that fast. One night we were sitting on my couch eating takeout, and he asked if I ever kept photos of my exes. I said no, and he said he deleted all his too, then laughed and added, well, almost all. Some of them are just too iconic. I thought he was joking. I laughed. We moved on. Then one night, I posted a photo of us at a pizza place on my story. It was nothing major, just a cute slice-in-hand type pic with him in the background, smiling, not even tagged. A few minutes later, he asked me to take it down. Said he wasn't big on social media and preferred to keep things low-key. I didn't think much of it at the time. Some people are just private, but it stuck with me. Especially because right after that, he got weirdly quiet for a couple days. Then things got weird. We were at his place, and he went to the kitchen to grab drinks. His phone buzzed on the table, and I wasn't snooping or anything, but the notification lit up, and I couldn't help but see the preview. It was a message from a contact saved as M that said, "This one's cute. Are you trying to make me jealous now?" I just stared at it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it gnawed at me. After he came back, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Eventually, I brought it up, casually, or at least I tried to. I asked if he was still in touch with his ex. His face did this thing people do when they're deciding how much of the truth to tell. He looked at me for a long second and then said, "We talk sometimes, but it's nothing. Just closure." Closure, the most suspicious word in the dating dictionary. I kept asking questions, and the more he talked, the worse it got. Turns out he hadn't just been texting his ex. He'd been actively sending her updates, screenshots, photos, even voice notes about me, about us. Not in a look how happy I am way, but in a look what you're missing kind of way. He said it like it wasn't a big deal, like it was some kind of twisted therapy. Said he was working through the past, and that showing her he was moving on helped him let go. I asked if she knew I didn't know about any of this. He shrugged. Said she didn't need to know everything either. I felt like I was in some alternate reality where logic didn't exist. I wasn't a person to him. I was a prop in whatever weird emotional game he was still playing with his ex. Every date, every photo, every playlist, it wasn't just for me. It was for her too. And she was watching it all like some sick soap opera. I left that night without saying much. I was too stunned to even argue. He texted me the next day acting like nothing had happened. Said he had fun. Sent a picture of the sushi he was eating with a "wish you were here." I didn't respond. He tried again a few days later. Sent another playlist. Said he missed talking to me. Then the text slowed down. Eventually he stopped. A couple weeks later, a friend of mine told me she'd seen his profile on another app. Same smile, same vibe. Different girl in the most recent photos. I couldn't help but wonder if she was being used the same way. Another pawn in his little heartbreak chessboard. I guess the worst part wasn't even the lying. It was how real he made it all feel. How carefully he created the version of himself he wanted me to see. How he let me believe we were building something while he was documenting it for someone else. Not because he cared about me. Not because he wanted to move on. But because he wanted to win. There's something weird about realizing you were just part of someone else's performance. Like finding out halfway through a date that there's a camera crew hiding behind the plants. You start questioning what was real, what was fake, and what was just rehearsal. Since then, I've been more careful. Not just about who I date, but about how quickly I trust the version of themselves people present. Because anyone can act sweet. Anyone can make a playlist. But not everyone is doing it for the reasons you think. The thing about dating apps is that they always sell you the highlight reel. No one shows up with their full mess out in the open. Everyone's curated, filtered, captioned with the right balance of witty and chill. Christie's profile was no exception. It had that clean, aesthetic look people try so hard to pull off without seeming like they're trying. She had pictures at some vineyard, a rooftop bar, and one of those yoga poses that only flexible people or liars can do. Her bio just said ambitious, selective, allergic to broke energy, which made me laugh more than it should have. We started chatting, and she was sharp, like quick with comebacks and really confident. A little intense, but I figured that's better than someone who doesn't know what they want. She made it clear early on that she didn't waste time, and honestly, I respected that. I've had enough dates that led nowhere, so someone being direct felt like a nice change of pace. She suggested we go to this trendy little spot that had just opened downtown. One of those places that only takes reservations through an app and serves food on marble slabs like it's supposed to mean something. I didn't mind. Figured it was worth checking out. When I got there, she was already sitting at a table outside, dressed like she'd walked straight off a fashion shoot. Hair done, nails perfect, wearing heels that looked like they cost more than my monthly groceries. We did the usual intros, and the first 10 minutes were fine. Talked about jobs, hobbies, the city. She worked in real estate, said she was building her empire, and liked to surround herself with high-value individuals. I nodded along, not totally sure what that meant, but also not trying to kill the vibe. She asked about my job, and I told her I worked in UMass design. She raised an eyebrow and said, "So you're in tech, good," and made a note on her phone. I laughed thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She pulled out this little notebook, like an actual physical one, and started flipping through pages. I thought maybe it was for work or something she needed to do after dinner. But then she said, "I like to keep track of things. It helps me stay intentional with my time. Then she looked up at me and said, "So let's just get the basics out of the way. Do you make six figures?" I thought I misheard her. I laughed and asked if she was serious, and she didn't even blink. Just said, "Look, I'm too old to waste time guessing. I date with purpose. If you qualify or if you don't." Now I'm not some broke dude living paycheck to paycheck, but still, who asked that before the appetizer even lands. I told her I was doing fine, comfortable, not rich but stable. She nodded slowly and said, "That's vague. I like transparency. Do you have your tax returns on you?" I thought she was joking again. She wasn't. She pulled out her own folder from her bag. Yes, a literal folder, and showed me her W-2s, her credit score, even a printout of her 401 statement like she was closing a loan or something. I stared at the paperwork, then at her, trying to figure out what reality I had stepped into. The waiter came by and I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, just out of spite. She ordered 2 appetizers, a main, and a dessert without even glancing at the prices. The whole time, she kept talking like this was a job interview. She asked if I had student loans, if I owned or rented, what my 5-year financial goals were. At one point, she literally asked me what I'd be worth by 40. I wanted to leave, but there was this weird part of me that stayed just to see how far she'd go. She talked about her ideal partner being someone who could match her ambition, someone who understood the grind, someone who wouldn't slow her down. She said she didn't believe in splitting bills because a real man provides. She even quoted something she heard on a podcast about how submission only comes after provision. Halfway through the meal, she looked up from her notes and said, "You're attractive enough, but I need more than potential." I told her I wasn't a startup looking for investors, and she said, "Well, that depends on what you bring to the table." It was like talking to a robot programmed by influencer advice threads and YouTube money gurus. She didn't want a partner. She wanted a sponsor with emotional availability and great abs. When the check came, she didn't even pretend to reach for her purse. Just sat there smiling at me like this was some kind of test. I paid because I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was already planning my escape the second we stood up. Outside, she asked if I wanted to come back to her place and go over goals. I told her I had an early meeting, and she said, "Figures. You probably don't even have passive income." Then she walked off like I was the one who didn't make the cut. I got in my car and sat there for a second, just processing everything. I'd never met someone so polished and put together, yet so disconnected from actual connection. She had all the language of empowerment and independence, but none of the softness that makes you want to build something with someone. It was all strategy, all metrics, no humanity. I don't mind ambition. I actually admire it. But there's a difference between wanting a stable future and reducing people to numbers on a spreadsheet. The wild part is, I think she genuinely believed she was being efficient, like this was the smartest way to find love. But it felt more like shopping for a car than getting to know a person. The next day, she texted me a thank you message and said she'd let me know if I made the cut after reviewing my notes. I didn't reply. She sent one more message a few days later saying she didn't think we were compatible, which honestly was the most accurate thing she said the entire time. Dating's weird now. Some people are looking for soulmates. Others are looking for status updates. I'm just trying to find someone who doesn't need to see my financial documents before dessert. It started out as a complete accident. I had deleted all the dating apps a month before after a string of weird matches and emotional exhaustion, but my best friend convinced me to download just one for the weekend as an experiment. Her words, not mine. So I re-downloaded Hinge, set my prompts up in the laziest way possible, and figured nothing would come of it. But then there was Nemo, and no, that wasn't a nickname. His actual name was Nemo. I almost unmatched just off that, thinking it was a joke, but he messaged first and was surprisingly normal, like way too normal for someone named after a Disney fish. He had this dry sense of humor that didn't hit you right away. His jokes took a second to land, but once they did, they were funny as hell. We talked about music, art, how we both had weirdly strong opinions about cereal brands, and how he once spent an entire summer learning how to make the perfect croissant. He said things like, "I think joy is underrated," and talked about how he wanted to live near water one day. The kind of stuff that feels soft but sincere. I liked it. We met at a Korean barbecue spot he picked because grilling meat together is the ultimate trust exercise. He showed up in a slightly wrinkled button-up and some beat-up Vans, and honestly, it just worked. He had this awkward charm that made you want to know more, like he didn't know how attractive he was, which only made him more attractive. The date went great. We laughed the whole time, tried to outdo each other with who could wrap the best lettuce wrap combo, and ended the night with boba from this sketchy-looking place that turned out to be incredible. It felt like one of those rare nights where everything just aligns, where time moves fast in a good way. After that, we kept hanging out. Nothing crazy, just small things. A walk around the lake trying out new coffee shops, watching weird foreign movies with subtitles that didn't match the audio. He wasn't flashy, but he was thoughtful. He remembered what I said about liking sunflowers and sent me a photo of a field when he passed one on the bus. Stuff like that. It wasn't until the fourth date that things took a turn. We were at his place eating Thai food off paper plates, and I mentioned how nice it was to finally date someone who didn't seem to have an agenda. He gave this nervous laugh and got really quiet for a second. Then he said, "Can I tell you something kind of serious?" And my stomach immediately dropped because that sentence never ends well. He said he'd been thinking a lot about our connection and how fast it was building, and how he really saw potential for something long-term. I nodded, thinking this was about to turn into one of those "I'm scared of commitment" monologues. But then he said, "How do you feel about marriage? Like soon?" I blinked, asked him what he meant by soon. He said, like within the next couple months. I thought he was joking, laughed awkwardly, but he didn't laugh back. Then he explained it. He was on a student visa that was about to expire in a few months. His job offer fell through, and if he couldn't find a new sponsor, he'd have to leave the country. He said he didn't want to go back to his home country because there wasn't much opportunity for him there. And he said, in the most casual tone possible, "I feel like we vibe. Would you ever consider getting married, for real, but also for the papers?" I just sat there. He wasn't saying it like it was a full-on scam. He made it sound like we'd be doing each other a favor. Like this wasn't just about him staying in the country, but about us fast-tracking something that's already good. He even threw in, "It's not like I'm asking you to do this for a stranger. You like me, right?" He kept talking. Said we could do a small ceremony, keep it low-key, and if things didn't work out romantically, we could stay friends and just handle it like a business arrangement. That we'd figure out the logistics later. But he did all of this without once asking how I felt about it. I don't even remember what I said in the moment. I think I laughed again, trying to make the tension go away. I asked him if he'd done this before. He looked offended and said no, that he was only asking me because he genuinely saw something between us. I left shortly after that. Told him I needed time to think. The minute I got home, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, going over every interaction we had, wondering if all those sweet little moments had just been setups, if I was just one of a list of potential marriage candidates he'd been scouting. He messaged the next day like nothing happened. Sent a video of a dog in a raincoat with a heart emoji. I didn't reply. He followed up later saying he didn't want to pressure me, that he respected whatever choice I made, but that his situation was serious and he hoped I could at least empathize. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him or thought he was evil, but because I didn't trust what we had anymore. The moment someone brings paperwork into something that's supposed to be about feelings, it changes everything. It makes every kiss, every message, every smile feel like it might have had a second purpose. The worst part is I think he really did like me. That's what makes it so complicated. He wasn't a con artist or some heartless manipulator. He was just desperate, and desperation does weird things to people. Makes them rewrite love into something transactional. Makes them see affection as a shortcut instead of something that takes time. I don't know if he ever found someone to help him stay. I blocked his number a week later after he sent me a message that said, "I just want you to know I still think you're incredible." Maybe I was. But not enough to sign government papers for someone I'd known less than a month. Dating's weird. You think you're getting to know someone, and then out of nowhere, they asked you to change your whole life. All I wanted was Thai food and a playlist. He wanted a green card and a wife. We weren't in the same movie. I was still in the trailer, and he was already at the credits. It's wild how people can be perfectly normal for 3 dates. Then on the 4th, say something that makes you question your entire existence. That's basically what happened with Linda. I met her on Tinder, haha. During one of those weeks where I told myself I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I still kept checking my phone every 10 minutes. Her profile had that kind of calculated warmth. Photos with golden hour lighting, quotes about self-love, and a bio that said, "I love deeply, laugh loudly, and don't do mediocre." We matched on a Sunday and started talking right away. She was quick with replies, asked good questions, and had this calming way of writing that made everything seem chill. We talked about books, music, favorite breakfast spots, and she even confessed to being weirdly obsessed with thunderstorms. That one stuck with me for some reason. Our first date was at this plant shop cafe that sold overpriced matcha and had tables made out of repurposed barn doors. She showed up wearing a denim jumpsuit and boots. I remember thinking she looked like someone from a Pinterest board. She gave me a hug right away, and it felt surprisingly familiar, like we'd done this before. The conversation flowed easily. She was funny in a dry, observant way. We stayed for 2 hours and then went for a walk down the street just to keep talking. Second date was dinner at a Vietnamese place she picked out. And third was a movie night at my place where we ended up pausing the film 10 times as we kept getting into these weird deep dives about relationships and life choices. She had strong opinions but never pushed them on me. She talked about wanting a family someday, but not in a clingy way. Just in that this is part of my plan kind of tone. I didn't think anything of it. Everyone's got a future image in their head. The fourth date was at her place. She invited me over for dinner and said she wanted to cook for me. I showed up with a bottle of wine and she was already barefoot in the kitchen, wearing a big t-shirt and playing Sade in the background. It felt weirdly domestic in a comforting way. She made some elaborate pasta dish that looked like it belonged in a cookbook, and the whole thing had this soft, intimate energy. I remember thinking, damn, maybe I could actually see something happening with her. We ate on the couch and talked about childhood stories, bad haircuts, and weird pet peeves. I was fully in the zone, relaxed, maybe even a little too relaxed. That's when she hit me with it. We were talking about last names randomly because she mentioned how hers was always mispronounced. I joked about how mine was boring and sounded like a chain store. She smiled and said, "Well, if things go well, I might be taking yours anyway." I thought she was joking, so I just kind of chuckled and said something dumb like, "Better start practicing your signature." But she didn't laugh. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "No, seriously, I thought about it. Your last name sounds good with the first name I picked out for my future daughter." I paused, waited for a punchline. Nothing. She kept going. Said she'd always liked the idea of naming her first child Lily, and she'd written it out a few times with my last name just to see how it looked. Said it rolled off the tongue better than her own. She said it like she was talking about redecorating a bedroom, not hypothetically naming a human child using my literal identity. I laughed again, trying to ease the tension, and said something like, "That's bold for date number 4. And she smiled, real casual, like we were just talking about dessert. Said she wasn't trying to rush anything, she just believed in manifesting. That she liked to visualize things she wanted and speak them into existence. Then she pulled out a notebook to show me a few baby name combinations she'd written down. My last name was attached to almost all of them. I didn't even know how to respond, like, yeah, we had a good run so far. I liked her, but we hadn't even made it official. I didn't know her middle name or if she snored or whether she'd ever seen The Office. And she was already looking into using my name like she was placing an order for custom stationery. It wasn't even just the baby name thing. It was the way she said it with no hesitation, like she'd been planning this since the first date, and was just waiting for the right moment to bring me in on it. She didn't ask how I felt about it. She didn't ask if I even wanted kids. She just assumed I'd be cool with it because everything had been going smooth. The rest of the night was a blur. I tried to act normal, but I was uncomfortable in this weird, quiet way. Like I just found a journal full of wedding plans written in my name and didn't know how to pretend it wasn't weird. She didn't pick up on it, or maybe she did and just didn't care. I left around 10, made up some excuse about being tired, and she kissed me on the cheek and said, "See you soon, future dad." The next day, she sent me a photo of a sunflower with a caption. This made me think of Lely. I stared at my phone for a solid minute before closing the app. I didn't ghost her. I just said I felt like things were moving too fast and I needed some space. She replied, "I get it," but then sent another message a few hours later saying she hoped I wouldn't let fear get in the way of something meant to be. I didn't reply. I think she meant well. I don't think she was trying to be manipulative or creepy. But there's a difference between knowing what you want and dragging someone to your vision board without asking. It felt like I was being cast in a movie she'd already written, and she didn't even audition anyone else for the role. Dating's full of strange moments, but that one stuck with me. Not because it was the worst date I ever had, but because it was the one that made me realize how fast people project. How fast they decide you are the solution to the life they've already designed. And how fast they forget you're a person with your own name, not just a name they can borrow for the next chapter. I met Loki on Tinder during one of those mindless swiping marathons people do when they're half watching TV and half convinced they'll never meet anyone normal again. His name caught my attention first, not because it was weird, but because who actually calls themselves Loki and expects to be taken seriously. I figured it was either a bad joke or some guy going through a Norse mythology phase. His photos were decent, not overly filtered, just basic shots. Him at a park, him holding a dog that may or may not have been his, and one of those dumb mirror selfies where the flash is too bright, but he still looked kind of good. I was bored, he seemed okay, so I swiped right. We matched instantly, and he messaged almost immediately. The conversation was smooth. He was funny without trying too hard, self-deprecating in a way that didn't feel performative, and surprisingly honest. He said he was a single dad, but the way he framed it was low-key. He said, "My daughter's cool as hell, but don't worry. You won't be meeting her unless you're actually sticking around." I appreciated the upfront vibe. I told him I respected that, and we just kept talking from there. After a few days of solid chats, he asked if I wanted to meet up. We settled on a weekend lunch, public, casual, no pressure. I picked a park with a little food truck plaza because it felt neutral. Safe. I got there a bit early and texted him. He said he was parking and would be there in 5. 5 minutes later, I turned around and saw a guy walking toward me with a teenage girl trailing behind him, headphones in, hoodie up, clearly not thrilled to be there. He smiled and waved. I blinked, tried to process what was happening. When he got closer, he threw one arm around the girl's shoulder and the other out toward me like we were about to take a family Christmas photo. "This is my daughter," he said, all casual. "And you," he added, looking at her, "this is mommy candidate number 4. I swear I stopped breathing for a second. His daughter didn't even look at me. Just rolled her eyes, mumbled something under her breath, and sat down at the nearest picnic table like she'd been dragged out of a dentist appointment. I stood there frozen, holding my iced tea like it was going to explain the situation to me. Loki laughed like this was some hilarious inside joke. "I figured it was time she got involved," he said. "You can't really get to know someone if they don't pass the kid test." He said it like it was logical, like I should be impressed with his forward thinking. I sat down awkwardly across from them. His daughter stayed on her phone, earbuds in, scrolling like her life depended on it. Loki started talking, just full-on storytelling about how hard it's been to date as a single dad, how he's trying to raise her right, how he needs someone who understands the package deal. All of this would have been fine if we were 5 months in, but this was our first in-person interaction. I didn't even know his last name, and I was suddenly being evaluated by a teenager who clearly didn't want to be there. He offered me a bite of his gyro like this was a perfectly normal picnic with a woman he hadn't met yet, a daughter who hadn't said a single word. I asked if this was something he did often, bringing his kid to first dates. He shrugged and said, "Not really. Only when I think the person might actually be worth it." I didn't know whether to feel flattered or wildly uncomfortable. Every time I tried to talk to him one-on-one, he pulled his daughter into the conversation. "Hey, tell her about that time we saw the raccoon steal someone's pizza. Or didn't she say something earlier that reminded you of that TikTok?" It was like he was trying to fast-track some kind of family bonding, but all it did was make everything feel forced and weird. At one point, he went to the bathroom and left me alone with her. I tried to make small talk, asked her about school, what music she liked. She pulled out one earbud, looked straight at me and said, "You're not gonna last either, but you seem less annoying than the last one." I just nodded, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Loki came back and asked if we wanted to grab ice cream. I said I had somewhere to be. He looked disappointed but nodded. We walked back toward the parking lot, and as we got to his car, he looked at his daughter and said, "So, what do we think? Thumbs up or down?" She shrugged. "She's all right." I felt like I just finished an audition I didn't know I was attending. I half expected him to hand me a call-back sheet and tell me I'd hear from his agent. He gave me a side hug and said, "I'll text you." "I really like this." I smiled, mostly out of politeness, and walked back to my car trying to process the weirdness of what just happened. He did text me later that night. Said his daughter thought I had potential. I didn't reply. The next day, he sent a meme and a thinking of you message. I ignored that too. By the third day, he messaged a little paragraph about how he respected that I wasn't interested but wished I had said something. I typed out a reply explaining that I wasn't ready to be anyone's surprise stepmom on a first date, but I deleted it. It didn't feel worth it. I kept thinking about that line, mommy candidate number 4, like I was some contestant on a dating reality show he was producing for his daughter's benefit. I get that dating as a single parent is hard. I can't even imagine the logistics and emotional weight. But there's a difference between being transparent and driving someone to your parenting strategy without warning. That whole date felt like I was a stand-in for some role he was trying to fill. Not a person, not a connection, just another name on a list. I don't blame the daughter. She was clearly over it. I just wish I hadn't walked into a situation where I wasn't even told what the situation was. Now, I asked more questions. I don't assume single parent means cool dad who knows boundaries. Sometimes it means guy who's a little too eager to assign roles that no one asked for. Lesson learned. Next time I'll make sure there are only 2 chairs at the table. She seemed different from the first message. Not flashy, not trying too hard. Just simple, direct, and kind of refreshing in a way that made you want to read her text twice. Her name was Abby. Her profile was a mix of outdoorsy pictures, dogs, and one photo where she was holding in a giant book with a caption that said, Modern World, Old Soul. I couldn't tell if it was deep or just something she thought sounded cool, but either way I matched with her. I figured if nothing else we could at least talk about books. From the beginning she had this calm energy about her. She wasn't constantly on her phone, didn't flood the conversation with emojis or dumb gifs. She responded with full sentences, asked meaningful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. It felt like she was really paying attention, which honestly isn't something I'd felt from someone on a dating app in a while. We met up after a few days of talking. The first date was at this little farm-style cafe just outside the city that she suggested. It had chickens in the back and homemade jam, which was a weird combo but kind of cool. She showed up in jeans and a flannel, hair tied back, no makeup. I remember thinking, she looks like she actually likes herself. There was something quiet and grounded about her, and I was into it. She told me she was into old school values, but it didn't get specific, so I assumed she meant things like loyalty, honesty, the usual stuff people say when they want to sound serious without sounding uptight. I didn't think much of it. We talked for 2 hours and walked the surrounding trails after, just chatting about life and relationships and the weird pressure to have it all figured out. She said she didn't believe in rushing things, and that good things take time. I agreed. It was one of the most low-pressure, easygoing dates I'd ever had. We saw each other again a few times after that. Coffee, a picnic, a bookstore where she made me read the back cover of every book she picked up. She'd smile and say things like, "You have a good voice. You should read to someone every night." It was cute. A little fast, maybe, but I didn't mind. She was affectionate in this subtle way, resting her hand on mine, brushing her arm against me when we walked side by side. She had a softness that made me feel calm, and I liked being around her. Then came the 5th date. We were sitting on a bench by the river after grabbing some sandwiches. It was a quiet day, warm breeze, birds doing their thing. She turned to me with this serious look on her face like she'd been waiting to say something. She said, "I think you're really special, and I've been praying about this." Right away, I was like, okay, this is either really good or really weird. Then she said, "I believe in traditional relationships, like very traditional, biblical even." I nodded, trying to look like I understood what that meant, but she wasn't finished. She said she believed men should lead and provide, and women should support and submit. That a good man's job was to protect and provide, and a good woman's job was to create peace, beauty, and order in the home. She said it like it was a compliment, like she was offering me some kind of role in a movie where I get to wear a crown and build an empire. I just kind of blinked. She kept going. Said she was looking for someone who would fully fund her lifestyle so she could focus on being the heart of the home. She wanted to stop working within the year, get married soon, and eventually homeschool kids. She said she was loyal to the bone, the kind of woman who would never betray her man. But in exchange, she expected complete financial support, decision-making authority to go to the man, and her role to revolve around nurturing, not earning. I asked her what she meant by fund her lifestyle, and she said it with zero hesitation. full rent or mortgage, utilities, food, personal expenses, vacation money, and eventually children's needs. She didn't want to work. Not part-time, not from home, nothing. She said, "My work will be the home and you. That's a full-time job." The way she looked at me after that, like she'd just delivered some golden truth, made me feel like I was in an infomercial for a life I hadn't signed up for. I said, "That's a lot to expect from someone this early," and she replied, "That's how serious women date. With clarity." The thing is, she didn't say any of this with entitlement. She wasn't being bratty or demanding. She was just dead serious. Calm. Like this was the only version of a relationship that made sense to her. Like she'd been dreaming of it since she was 12 and never once stopped to question if it was what anyone else wanted. I told her I wasn't sure I saw myself in that kind of role, and she just nodded like she expected it. She said, "That's okay. You're probably just not ready to lead a family yet." She said it without judgment, but it still stung. Like she'd already decided I was too soft for her world, too modern, too flexible. After that, I tried to create some space. She texted a few times asking how I was, sending Bible verses and articles about building strong masculine energy. I didn't respond right away. Eventually, I told her I didn't think we were compatible long term. She replied with a polite, "Thank you for your honesty. I wish you well." And that was that. I think about it sometimes, how someone can seem so laid back and warm, and still have this rigid blueprint for love that leaves zero room for discussion. She wasn't unkind. She wasn't dramatic, but she had this set idea of what a relationship should be, and there was no flexibility. It wasn't about us figuring out what works together. It was about me fitting into a role she already had waiting. Dating's full of surprises. You think you're building something together, and then it turns out you're just applying for a job in someone else's fantasy. And no matter how nice the benefits sound, if it doesn't feel like freedom, it's not love. It started off so chill I didn't see the red flags until they were basically wrapped around my neck. Josh seemed like one of the more grounded guys I'd matched with in a while. His profile didn't have any shirtless mirror pics or quotes from Joe Rogan. He had one where he was holding a cup of coffee and smiling at a dog that clearly wasn't his, but the smile looked real. His bio said something like lover of slow mornings and deep conversations, which was corny, yeah, but also better than 90% of what's out there. I rolled my eyes, swiped right, and he messaged me 5 minutes later. We talked a lot that first week. It was easy. He wasn't too intense, didn't try to flirt aggressively, and had decent grammar, which unfortunately still feels rare. He asked thoughtful questions like, what do you wish people asked you more? And what kind of peace do you chase? Weirdly specific, but it made him stand out. I liked that he didn't rush to me right away. We texted for a few days, swapped playlists, and eventually had a phone call that lasted almost 3 hours without either of us realizing how late it got. When we finally met, it was at this small Italian place he picked, one of those little spots with brick walls and fairy lights that made everything feel more romantic than it really was. He was exactly how I expected. Tall, calm, a little quieter in person, but not awkward. We talked about family and past relationships therapy. He mentioned he was a big believer in it. And the usual, how did you end up on Tinder stuff? I walked away from that dinner thinking, okay, maybe this one's different. For the next week, we kept hanging out. We had a picnic in the park, went thrifting one afternoon, and stayed in to watch a dumb sci-fi movie that made both of us cry from laughing. He'd text me every morning with something small. Dreamed about pancakes, or sun looks good today. Just random things that made it feel like he was letting me into his life in these little pieces. It was sweet. Then one night, I noticed something had shifted. He texted me, "Hey, can we talk for a sec?" And I got that weird flutter of anxiety, like when a teacher says they need to chat after class. I called him and he was weirdly serious. Said he wanted to talk about something that had been on his mind, something important to any real relationship. I thought maybe he was gonna say he was catching feelings or he needed to slow things down or some normal early dating thing. Instead, he asked me to delete all my male friends. Not block, not mute. Just straight up remove them from my life. I waited for the punchline, but he was dead serious. Said he believed in sacred boundaries, and that when a man and woman are dating seriously, there's no need for opposite gender friendships. Said it invites temptation, confusion, and emotional cheating. He used all these terms like emotional loyalty and relational purity, like he'd been reading from some handbook written by a jealous ex-boyfriend who found a Wi-Fi signal in the woods. At first I tried to laugh it off and make a joke, but he doubled down. He told me if I really saw a future with him, I'd cut ties with distractions. Distractions being my friends. Friends I've known for years. Friends who've helped me through breakups and breakdowns, who've stayed up with me on FaceTime at 2 a.m. when life was falling apart. And he wanted me to just cut them off like loose threads because he thought their existence was somehow disrespectful to him. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. That trust was more important than control. He said it wasn't about control, it was about commitment. Said, if I wasn't willing to make sacrifices now, how would I ever prove I could be loyal in a marriage? That's when the conversation shifted from weird to straight up creepy. He started picking apart specific friends, ones I'd mentioned in passing, and asking what value they added to my life. He asked if I ever had feelings for any of them, if they'd ever flirted with me, if I ever thought they'd be a backup plan in case things didn't work out with him. I was stunned. I'd known this man for maybe 3 weeks, and suddenly I was being interrogated like I was on trial for a crime I didn't commit. I told him I wasn't comfortable having this conversation, and he said, if you're not willing to talk about boundaries, you're not serious about commitment. He made it sound like I was the one being shady just for having a social life that didn't revolve around him. After that, things unraveled quickly. He started bringing up more little comments like, still talking to your guy friends, huh? Or, I bet they love it when you're single. He'd send screenshots of articles about platonic friendships being dangerous, as if he was trying to educate me out of my own instincts. The thing that messed me up was how normal he had seemed at first. The soft texts, the thoughtful questions, the quiet charm, it all felt real. But under it was this obsession with control, with ownership, with turning a relationship into something rigid and rules-based instead of something built on mutual respect. I tried to explain that trust means allowing your partner to have a life outside of you. He said I was too modern and didn't understand what true commitment meant. Eventually, I just stopped replying. The last message he sent was, you'll see one day that I was right. Enjoy being everyone's favorite option. I blocked his number. I still think about it sometimes, how fast something that feels like care can twist into control. How someone who asks all the right questions can still be waiting to rewrite your life to fit their blueprint. And how the scariest thing isn't loud toxicity. It's the quiet kind that sneaks in with compliments and voice notes, and just checking in texts until one day you're being asked to erase your entire support system in the name of love. I don't delete my friends. Not for anyone. Especially not for someone who sees commitment as ownership and boundaries as ultimatums. It's not a sacrifice when it costs you your peace. It's a red flag, even if it's wrapped in soft words and Sunday morning good mornings. The first thing Brandon ever said to me was about socks. Not in a weird way, but in a why do ankle socks even exist kind of way. And somehow it turned into a whole debate that lasted 2 hours. We matched on Monday afternoon and started talking instantly. His profile was full of artsy black and white photos, a couple shots of him hiking, and one of him holding a cat with the caption, I'm not a cat guy, but she chose me. I'm not proud of it, but that one photo sold me. He had this calm, reflective vibe about him. The kind of person who pauses before he speaks, and when he does, it actually sounds like he means what he says. Our first few conversations went deep fast, talking about weird childhood memories, dream travel spots, favorite sounds. He told me he liked the sound of train stations late at night because they reminded him of beginnings. I said I liked wind through trees. He said we'd probably get along. I believed him. We met for coffee a few days later. It was one of those in-between weather days, cool enough for a jacket but not cold enough to be miserable. We sat outside at a tiny corner table, people watched, and sipped drinks way too slowly. He had this thing where he'd really look at you while you talked, like full eye contact, zero distractions. It made you feel like whatever you were saying was the most important thing in the world. The date ended with him walking me in my car and saying he had a really good time, but in a way that wasn't forced. Like he didn't need me to say it back, he just wanted to say it. It felt rare. For the next 2 weeks, we kept seeing each other. Nothing huge, just chill dates, good food, lots of talking. He never tried to push anything physical or rush the vibe. He told me early on that he was working through stuff and taking things slow, which I respected. He said he was in therapy and trying to be more emotionally present before jumping into anything serious. I was cool with that. It actually made me trust him more. One night, we were at his place watching a movie. He made popcorn the old school way on the stove, and we sat with our legs tangled on the couch like we'd been doing this for months. At one point, the movie got quiet and he turned to me and said, "I like you, just so you know." It wasn't dramatic or overly romantic. It was simple. I said I liked him too. Then he added, "I just need a little more time." I figured he meant emotionally. Like, okay, maybe he had trust issues or past relationship stuff to sort through. I could deal with that. Everyone comes with something. But a few days later, I found out what he really meant. We were out for dinner and he seemed a little off. Not distant, but quieter than usual. I asked if he was okay, and he said, "There's something I should probably tell you." Then he kind of laughed under his breath and said, "You're gonna think I'm ridiculous." He told me he was still in love with someone else. Just straight out with it. No sugarcoating. He said he was doing therapy to process his last relationship and that he wasn't over her yet, but he liked being around me because I made him feel hopeful again. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, trying to understand what I was supposed to say. He said he wasn't trying to hurt me or use me, that he genuinely cared about me, but also needed space to grieve the old relationship. Then he asked if I'd be willing to hold space for him while he worked through it. Said he wasn't asking me to wait around exactly, just not leave. I asked how long he'd been broken up with her. He said it had been 4 months, but they'd only stopped talking a few weeks ago. So not really over at all. The first thing Brandon ever said to me was about socks. Not in a weird way, but in a why do ankle socks even exist kind of way. And somehow it turned into a whole debate that lasted 2 hours. We matched on Monday afternoon and started talking instantly. His profile was full of artsy black and white photos, a couple shots of him hiking, and one of him holding a cat with the caption, "I'm not a cat guy, but she chose me." I'm not proud of it, but that one photo sold me. He had this calm, reflective vibe about him. The kind of person who pauses before he speaks, and when he does, it actually sounds like he means what he says. Our first few conversations went deep fast, talking about weird childhood memories, dream travel spots, favorite sounds. He told me he liked the sound of train stations late at night because they reminded him of beginnings. I said I liked wind through trees. He said we'd probably get along. I believed him. We met up for coffee a few days later. It was one of those in-between weather days, cool enough for a jacket, but not cold enough to be miserable. We sat outside at a tiny corner table. I asked if she knew he was dating again. He said probably not. That they had agreed to take time apart, but didn't set rules about seeing other people. Then he said something that stuck with me in the worst way. "You're like the calm after the storm, but I'm still drying off." That's when I knew I was being cast as someone's recovery plan. He wanted me to be patient and understanding, to offer support and connection and maybe even love, while he untangled his heart from someone else. He said if I could just be patient, we could have something really good. That I was what he needed, even if he still wanted her. It felt gross. Not because he was trying to heal. I respect people doing the work. But because he made it sound like I was the prize for doing nothing except sticking around. Like my worth was in how long I could hold out while he got over someone who wasn't me. I told him I didn't want to be anyone's emotional waiting room. He nodded, said he understood, and asked if we could still keep in touch while he figured things out. I said no. Not because I was mad, but because I've been that before. I've been the filler person. The bridge. The maybe. I stopped answering his texts after that night. He sent a few more over the next week. Little updates, random memes, a sad song he said reminded him of me. I didn't block him, but I didn't respond either. The truth is, I did like him. I liked his quiet. I liked how he listened. I liked the way he let me exist without trying to fix or impress me. But I also knew I deserved to be someone's choice, not someone's transition. Brandon was soft, thoughtful, but not ready. And I'm not here to be someone's soft place to land while they still dream about where they came from. I want someone who walks into my life because they left the past, not because they're waiting to see if it follows them. Everything about it looked polished, perfect lighting, perfect angles, captions that said things like living in alignment and raising vibrations daily. Her smile was nice, but a little too practiced, and her photos had that soft glow like they were all filtered through some spiritual energy lens. There was one picture of her standing barefoot in a field holding a mason jar of green juice. Another of her leading a yoga class on a beach. I figured, okay, maybe she's into the wellness thing. No big deal. Lots of people are. Her first message was actually pretty cute. She asked, if your energy was a fruit, what would it be? I said mango because it's chill but still gets attention. She said hers was papaya, which she claimed had healing frequencies. I laughed. It was weird, but it wasn't boring, and that alone was a win. We started chatting more, and to her credit, she was super engaging. She asked unusual questions like, what's your purpose when no one's watching? And how often do you recharge your spiritual batteries? I had no idea what that meant, but I rolled with it. We made plans to meet for lunch at this vegan cafe she picked. I wasn't vegan, but I figured I could fake it for one meal. When I got there, she was already sitting outside at a table with her crystals laid out in a little cloth circle like she was doing a seance. She smiled when she saw me and said, I already saged the space for us, like that was the most normal thing in the world. She was dressed in flowy linen pants, a tank top with a mandala on it, and she smelled like lavender and patchouli. The moment I sat down, she handed me a tiny vial of essential oil and told me to anoint my palms with clarity. I did it because I didn't want to be rude, and also because I had no idea what else to do. The conversation started out fine. She talked about meditation, sound baths, some breathwork training she was doing. I told her I didn't really know much about any of that, but was open to learning. She smiled and said she appreciated my openness to expansion. At that point, I was still thinking maybe she was just a little extra into wellness. No harm in that. Then she asked me what my current streams of abundance were. I blinked. Asked her to repeat that. She said, your income streams. You're building financial flow, right? I told her I had a regular 9 to 5 and freelance on the side. She nodded slowly and said, that's okay for now. Then she pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and said, I think you'd be perfect for my team. I froze. Team. She started explaining how she's part of a wellness collective that promotes holistic healing, financial empowerment, and freedom from the 9 to 5 system. Said she was a high-vibe entrepreneur working with a community of conscious creators. I asked what that actually meant, and she said they sell herbal supplements, courses, and intentional living kits through a referral-based structure. My stomach sank. It was a pyramid scheme, a spiritual, sage-scented pyramid scheme. She kept going, talking fast, clearly excited, maybe thinking I was about to jump in and ask where to sign. She said she'd already activated 5 streams of income and was looking to expand her tribe. Then she pulled out a pamphlet, an actual glossy printed pamphlet, and slid it across the table like she was revealing a treasure map. It had charts, diagrams, buzzwords like quantum lifestyle, energetic scaling, and soul-centered sales. I skinned it and saw payment breakdown for different levels of enlightenment, aka how much product you buy and resell. She said I'd be a great masculine presence for her team and that couples in the program elevated faster. I told her I wasn't really looking to join anything right now, as she smiled like I was just scared. She said resistance was part of the awakening process and that most people who say no are trapped in scarcity consciousness. I told her I just wasn't interested in selling supplements to my friends and family. That's when she got offended. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and said, wow, you're blocking your own spiritual growth. I laughed, mostly out of disbelief, and said I didn't think hawking overpriced mushroom powder was part of my life path. She didn't like that. Said I was being closed-minded and probably had unresolved trauma around abundance. I told her I just didn't want to get roped into a multi-level marketing scam and that maybe this wasn't going to work out. She grabbed her crystals, stood up, and said, I will be fine healing. You're clearly not aligned with greatness. I watched her walk away barefoot, leaving the pamphlet and have a green smoothie on the table. I sat there for a minute, stunned, then flagged down the server and asked for the check. The wild part was that for a moment I really thought she was cool. She seemed thoughtful, intentional, even peaceful. But underneath it all was this sales pitch wrapped in spiritual jargon. She wasn't looking for a relationship. She was looking for a business partner with a pulse and a bank account. A few hours later, she texted me a follow-up link to a webinar. I didn't open it. A couple days after that, she sent one last message that said, you're either expanding or contracting. There's no in between. I blocked her. Look, I'm all for people chasing dreams and building something for themselves, but there's something extra gross about using the language of healing and growth to mask a hustle, especially when you dress it up in soul talk and try to make someone feel broken for not buying in. I still can't smell lavender without thinking about that lunch, or hear the word alignment without picturing her sliding that glossy pamphlet across the table like it was a sacred text. Sometimes people aren't looking for a connection. They're just looking for someone to pitch to. And sometimes the vibe they're raising is just a sales quota. I wasn't even supposed to swipe that day. I had deleted the app for the third time in 2 months, but boredom got the best of me on a rainy Sunday, and before I knew it, there I was again, scrolling through the same types of guys with the same gym pics, car selfies, and fishing photos. But then I came across Ethan. No fish, no shirtless mirror shots, no work hard, play harder captions. Just one pic of him sitting on a rooftop at golden hour with a slice of pizza and a genuine looking smile. His bio said, looking for someone to brainstorm terrible business ideas with. And I thought, okay, at least he has a sense of humor. We started chatting, and right away it felt fun. Not forced, not flirty in that performative way some guys try to be, just easy and funny. He made dumb jokes about turning every conversation into a pitch, and we joked about Shark Tank like we were two burnt out contestants who got kicked off in the first 5 minutes. I liked that he didn't ask for selfies or call me queen after 3 messages. He just talked like a person. Refreshing, honestly. We decided to meet up at this dive bar with a pool table and terrible lighting. He showed up in a worn hoodie and sneakers, hair kind of messy, but in a good way. I remember thinking he looked like someone who didn't try too hard, but still cared. We grabbed drinks, played a game of pool, he was terrible, and talked about everything from weird childhood snacks to conspiracy theories we didn't actually believe. It was one of those dates where it didn't feel like a date, just two people hanging out and vibing. Over the next few weeks, we kept meeting up. Movie nights, random late night walks, cooking dinner at my place, and arguing over which way the toilet paper should roll. I liked how comfortable it felt. Like I didn't have to perform or impress or constantly check if I was saying the right thing. He'd send me weird memes at 2 a.m., talk about how he wished adult friendships had recess, and once even showed up to my place with bubble tea, because you seemed like you needed a reset. I was starting to genuinely like him. Then he started talking about his big idea. It came out of nowhere one night when we were sitting on my floor eating leftover pasta and watching a documentary about competitive dog grooming. He muted the TV and said, "Okay, don't laugh. I've been thinking about something." He told me he wanted to start a sneaker reselling business. Not that wild, honestly. People flip shoes all the time, but then he kept going. He said he wanted to turn my apartment into the base for it. Like, literally use my space as his operations center. He had it all planned out in his head. Boxes stacked in the living room, spare room converted into a storage unit, maybe even getting shelves to line the hallway. He said he'd take care of everything, just needed the space temporarily to get started. Said he'd be doing the buying and selling, but I could help with packaging. I wanted to get in on the ground floor. I laughed at first because I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He pulled out his phone and showed me mock-ups, spreadsheets, a name for the brand, even a logo he had paid someone $20 to design. He had been building this in the background the whole time, apparently, and just hadn't told me yet. When I asked where he lived, he admitted he had just moved back in with his brother. Said it was temporary, but his room there was too small to hold the kind of inventory he wanted to build. My place, apparently, was more ideal, and I was already comfortable with him being around, so it just made sense. I asked him what part of this was a joke. He looked confused, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I wasn't hyped about the idea. He said it was an opportunity, not just for him, but for both of us, that we could build something together, that I thanked him when it blew up and we were raking in profits. I told him I wasn't interested in turning my apartment into a shipping facility. He said I was being short-sighted, that real partners support the hustle. When I asked what I'd actually get out of this besides clutter and stress, he said, "You be part of something." Isn't that enough? No, it wasn't. I tried to explain that I liked him, but this wasn't the kind of boundary crossing I could just overlook. He kept pushing, said it'd only be a few months, that he could even pay a little rent if it helped. I asked why he couldn't rent a storage unit. He said those were too expensive right now, but apparently using my entire home for free was a smart financial decision. I didn't yell or lose it. I just got really quiet. Told him I needed time to think. He looked disappointed but nodded. Hissed me on the forehead like I was the one letting him down. Then he left. The next morning, I got a long text saying he respected my decision but felt like I was missing a rare chance to grow together. Said he hoped I didn't let fear get in the way of building something real. I didn't respond. Over the next few days, he sent a couple more messages. Updates on how the sneaker thing was going. Photos of his inventory. One selfie in front of a bunch of stacked boxes in what looked like his brother's garage. I muted the thread and never replied. The thing is, I didn't hate the guy. I actually really liked him. But somewhere along the way, I realized he didn't see me as a person with my own life. He saw me as a resource. Someone to support his plan, hold his mess, make his vision easier. And that kind of partnership. That's not partnership at all. That's just one person pitching a dream and hoping someone else is desperate enough to fund it. I wanted something real. He wanted a storage unit with a heartbeat. Not the same thing. He looked totally normal, like too normal in hindsight. Liam's profile was one of those clean, minimalist setups. 3 photos, no bio, just a guy in a white t-shirt standing on a beach. Another one of him laughing in a bar with friends. And the third, of course, a mirror selfie that was somehow both casual and calculated. I almost didn't swipe because there was so little to go on, but something about that beach photo seemed easygoing, unbothered. And I was in one of those moods where I wasn't looking for anything deep. Just someone to make the next hour of my night a little more entertaining. He messaged me first with something basic, just, "Hey, how's your week going?" But he kept the conversation going with these perfectly timed replies. Witty, just enough sarcasm, and always ending with a question to keep me talking. I noticed right away how good he was at saying the right thing. Not overly charming, but just smooth enough to make me feel like I was actually being listened to. We had that banter that makes texting addictive, where you keep checking your phone even when you're in the middle of something important. We set up a dinner date after a couple days of chatting. He picked the place, some trendy fusion spot downtown with exposed brick and oddly shaped chairs. I showed up a few minutes early and waited outside. He arrived right on time, wearing black jeans and a jacket that looked expensive but not flashy. He smiled when he saw me, and I remember thinking, okay, this might actually be decent. Dinner was good. He talked a lot, but he was interesting, so I didn't mind. He asked me thoughtful questions about my job, my family, my last vacation. He made these small observations about my answers that felt personal, like he was really tuned in. There was something very collected about him, like every word had been run through an internal filter before he said it. I remember thinking, he seems like the type that reads relationship books for fun. But again, not in a bad way. At one point, I asked him how long he'd been single and what he was looking for, and he gave the most rehearsed yet natural answer I'd ever heard. Said he'd been working on himself, wanted something genuine, hated games, believed in open communication, all the greatest hits of modern dating profiles. He said it like he'd said it 100 times, and I started to feel this quiet little nudge in my gut like, why does this sound like a script? I ignored it. After dinner, we walked for a bit, just wandering downtown. He didn't try to hold my hand or push for anything. He kept the vibe respectful, even warm. It was actually kind of nice. As we walked, he asked deeper questions. Stuff like, what's something that makes you feel powerful? And have you ever been in love with someone who didn't love you back? I answered honestly, and he nodded like he was cataloging every word. The night ended with a hug and a promise to see each other again. I went home feeling cautiously optimistic. We texted every day after that. Good mornings, random articles he thought I liked, voice notes with funny little observations. But something started to feel too curated, like everything he said was designed to hit a certain note. He'd tell me how emotionally safe I made him feel, how beloved that I was self-aware and present. And while that sounds nice, it felt weird coming from someone I barely knew. Then about a week in, we were on a phone call, just talking about random stuff, and I heard someone else in the background. A guy's voice. Nothing suspicious, just someone laughing and asking him if he was still taking notes. I laughed and asked what that was about. There was a pause. Then he told me. He said, very casually, like he was telling me his favorite pizza topping, that he was taking part in a men's coaching program. Something about developing high-value masculinity and improving communication with women. I asked what kind of program. He said it was about helping men build confidence and understand relationship dynamics better. Still sounded fine, even kind of admirable. But then he added that the program encouraged members to go on dates and document their experiences. I said, "Wait, are you saying I'm part of your homework?" He said, "No, not like that. That you really liked me. That what we had was real. But yes, technically, our conversations and dates were helping him apply the material." He said he was journaling after each interaction to unpack the energy and analyze emotional feedback loops. I was stunned. He was using our conversations as case studies. Every moment, every text, every vulnerable thing I'd shared. He was writing it all down to reflect on later. Not because he was genuinely growing, but because he was trying to level up in some group full of dudes probably quoting YouTube gurus and discussing frame control. I asked if any of his coaches or peers knew who I was. He said no, of course not. That he never used names, but that didn't make it better. I wasn't a person to him. I was Dea, a live subject in his self-improvement experiment. I told him it made me uncomfortable, and he said I was overreacting. That it was no different than someone journaling about their relationship or talking to friends about dating. I disagreed. This wasn't reflection. This was manipulation dressed as personal growth. He wasn't learning how to be a better partner. He was learning how to perform as one. The next day, he texted saying he hoped we could move past the misunderstanding. That he'd stopped taking notes and just wanted to get to know me authentically. I didn't respond. He followed up a few days later with a long message about emotional responsibility and how our connection was expansive. I blocked his number. The whole thing felt fake in the worst way. Not because he was rude or pushy or even dishonest in a traditional sense, but because every moment I thought was real had been dissected, studied, and maybe even rehearsed. He wasn't trying to build something with me. He was trying to build a version of himself he could show off to a group chat full of guys trying to hack relationships like they're cheat codes. Dating's already hard enough without wondering if you're being turned into someone's research project. I don't need perfect answers or deep questions off a notepad. I just want someone who's present, not performing, not experimenting, just real. It was the playlist that got me. Not even her photos, though those were solid, one of her hiking in Sedona, another with her arms around a big shaggy dog, and one blurry shot of her laughing at what looked like a food truck. But it was the playlist in her bio that made me pause. If you want to know me, listen to this. It said, followed by a Spotify link. I clicked it out of curiosity and ended up listening to the whole thing on my walk home. It was a weird mix of indie, soft rock, old school hip hop, and a couple acoustic covers I pretended not to like, but secretly saved. So I swiped right, obviously. We matched the next morning. Her first message was just the fire emoji, followed by "you passed the vibe check." I rolled my eyes but smiled. We started talking from there, and the convo flowed fast. She was witty without being too much, clever with her timing, and had a habit of sending me screenshots of memes 5 seconds before they went viral. I liked how specific she was when she talked about things. Like when I told her I like making breakfast for dinner, she went off about how syrup doesn't belong on eggs, but can flirt with potatoes. It felt like we clicked in a way that was easy and fun. Low pressure. She said she hated small talk and wanted to skip to the good parts. So I told her my most embarrassing childhood story, and she sent me a voice note of her laughing so hard she snorted. I was in. Our first date was at this record shop that doubled as a coffee bar. She showed up in a faded vintage band tee and immediately started judging my music taste based on the vinyl I gravitated toward. I gave her a hard time about liking Bon Iver and Megan Thee Stallion. She said duality is sexy. We grabbed iced lats and sat on a bench outside, talking for 2 hours straight. Nothing heavy, just stuff like our favorite cartoon villains, dream vacation spots, and the dumbest reason we'd ever cried. Hers was a broken mug. Mine was a discontinued snack. She was magnetic. That's the only way to describe it. It wasn't just the way she looked, though yeah, she was beautiful. It was more the way she listened and responded like she already knew the next thing I was going to say and wanted to say it with me. She made me feel interesting, seemed a little special. She kept telling me, "You're like real, not fake deep, not try hard. Just real." We went out again and again after that. Always fun, always easy. The more time we spent together, the more it felt like we were the same kind of weird. She made playlists for moods that don't have names and said things like, "I want to know how you think, not just what you think." She'd ask really specific questions like, "What's a smell that makes you feel safe?" Or, "What part of your personality do you think people overlook?" Stuff that made you feel like she was building a 3D version of you in her head. I started catching feelings hard. But then something small started feeling off. It was subtle. Like I'd mentioned something random, and she'd already know. Or she'd talk about a song I loved that I swore I hadn't told her about. At first, I figured maybe I had mentioned it and forgotten. But then it happened again. I told her I just started rewatching a certain show, and the next day she posted a story of her watching it too, with a caption like, "Giving this another shot." I remember thinking, okay, weird coincidence. But the coincidences stacked up. Favorite food spots, woke preferences, phrases I used. Suddenly they were hers too. She started using little expressions I'd said once in passing like they'd been in her vocabulary for years. I mentioned I like when people send long voice notes. She sent me 3 the next day. I told her I hated when people try too hard to relate. She stopped doing it entirely, like flipping a switch. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it felt like she was adjusting herself in real time to match me. Then I found out she was. We were hanging at her place one night, and she left to take a call. Her laptop was open on the couch, and I wasn't snooping, but I glanced over and saw my name in an open doc. At first, I thought it was a message or maybe something she was writing for me. But when I looked closer, it wasn't a message. It was a full-on note list. Bullet points. Stuff about me. Favorite foods, habits, things I'd said on dates, exact phrases I used. There were even quotes from our convos with timestamps and follow-ups on how she should respond next time. One line literally said, "Act more surprised when he brings this up again." I felt sick. It wasn't just that she was taking notes. It was that she was building a version of herself designed specifically to fit what I liked. Like I was an algorithm, and she was inputting the right codes to keep me hooked. When she came back in the room, I asked her about it. She looked panicked for a second, then tried to laugh it off. Said she was just journaling, that she liked remembering details. I told her it felt manipulative, like I wasn't dating a person. I was dating a mirror version of myself. She got defensive. Said I should be flattered that someone cared enough to try that hard, that I was overthinking it. But I wasn't. I left that night without making a scene. Told her I needed space. She texted me the next day with a long, poetic message about how connection is a puzzle and she was just trying to fit the edges. I didn't respond. The truth is, I don't want a version of myself reflected back at me. I don't want someone who studies me like a project, memorizes my likes and dislikes just to win me over. I want messy. I want unpredictable. I want someone who says the wrong things sometimes, someone who has their own taste, their own thoughts, their own edges that don't always line up with mine. What she gave me wasn't love or even affection. It was a performance, and it's hard to trust anything that feels rehearsed. Now when I think about that playlist in her bio, I wonder if it was even hers at all, or if she just waited to find someone who would like it. Someone like me. The first time I matched with Julia, I thought the app had glitched. Her profile looked like one of those influencer pages where everything is hyper-curated. Every picture perfectly lit, every caption effortlessly cool. She had that rich girl without trying aesthetic. One photo at an art gallery, another in front of a Vespa somewhere in Italy, and one with a tiny purse and sunglasses inside a cafe that looked like it only sold coffee to people with a following. Her bio said elegance is a mindset, which I normally would have rolled my eyes at. I don't know, I was curious. She messaged me first, just a simple, "You seem like you have decent taste." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a test, but I responded. I said something dumb about socks and how I judge people based on whether they match them or not. She said mismatched socks were a sign of a scattered life. That was the moment I should have known what I was getting into. Still, the conversation was easy. She was sharp and confident and knew how to carry herself. We didn't talk long before she suggested we meet up. That should have been another clue she wasn't big on drawn-out texting. She said she preferred real-time energy. I said sure. She picked the place, of course. It was this sleek little restaurant I'd never heard of, one of those where the lighting is dim on purpose and the menus don't have prices. I didn't even get the chance to suggest something else. She sent me the reservation time and the name of the place like it was already locked in. When I got there, she was already seated. She waved me over, smiled like we'd met before, and gestured to the empty seat next to her like she'd been waiting to fill it all her life. She looked good, obviously. Everything about her was polished but not stiff. You could tell she knew exactly how she looked walking into a room, and she liked the way people reacted. I sat down and tried to make a joke about how fancy the place was. She barely reacted, just nodded and said, "I don't usually do casual dates. Time is too expensive." That line kind of hung in the air. Then she motioned to the girl sitting across from us. "This is my best friend, Ivy." I was confused for a second. I thought maybe Ivy just happened to be there and was leaving soon. But no, she was part of the date. I'd just been thrown into a three-person situation with zero warning. I smiled awkwardly and shook her hand. Ivy smiled back but didn't say much. She looked just as polished as Julia, like they both stepped out of the same Zara campaign. Julia launched right into conversation like this was the most normal thing in the world. She asked me how many siblings I had, if I'd ever been in a long-term relationship, if I considered myself financially intentional. Ivy nodded approvingly when I said I had a savings account. It felt less like a date and more like a job interview with backup HR. I tried to play along. I asked them how they met, and Julia told me the whole story of how they were randomly paired in college housing and now were inseparable. Ivy laughed and said we even go on dates together sometimes, like it was quirky and not deeply confusing. I kept waiting for Ivy to leave. She never did. Eventually, the waiter came over and asked if we were ready to order. Julia didn't even look at the menu. She pointed to a dish and said, "We'll start with the carpaccio, and then I'll have the halibut." Then she looked at Ivy, who ordered without hesitation. Then they both looked at me. I picked something mid-price because I was already getting a weird vibe, and I wasn't about to go broke trying to impress someone who brought an audience. The food was good, sure, but it was hard to focus with Julia grilling me on everything from my travel history to whether I wanted kids before 35. Ivy chimed in here and there, mostly to nod or raise her eyebrows in disapproval like some kind of emotional scoreboard. When the check came, Julia pushed it toward me without blinking. No joke, just a gentle slide of the folder across the table like it was understood. I paused, looked at her, and looked at Ivy. They both just stared, waiting, like this was the moment I gotta prove I was provider material, like paying for two people on a first date was some kind of masculine rite of passage. I paid, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to get out of there with minimal drama. I signed the receipt, tried to smile, and said, "Well, this was informative." Julia smiled sweetly and said, "I'll let you know how you did." Ivy said nothing. I walked out alone. Later that night, I got a message from Julia. She said, "You're sweet, but I'm looking for someone who steps up without needing to be asked." That hesitation when the check came, that was telling. Then she added a thumbs up emoji, like this was a game show and had just been voted off the island. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for the unsolicited test and the $140 lesson in ego. It still bugs me sometimes, not because I wanted things to work out, but because I didn't even get to be myself. The whole thing felt like I was cast in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I was supposed to say the right lines, hit the right marks, and walk away with a stamp of approval I never asked for. I don't mind paying on a date. I actually prefer it. But not when it's treated like a transaction that determines my value. Not when someone brings a witness to make sure I pass the script. Since then, I've made it a rule. If someone brings a +1 to the first date, I leave before the drinks even hit the table. I'm not applying for a job. I'm trying to meet someone real, not audition for the role of man who pays for strangers. He had that bookstore guy aesthetic. You know, the one, messy hair like he just ran his hands through it while reading something complicated, wireframe glasses that probably weren't prescription, and the kind of smirk that made you wonder if he was about to compliment you or ruin your self-esteem. Daniel. His photos were all slightly out of focus, artsy, and captioned like poetry. Just here for honest moments, and I love people who think deeply. I should have known from that alone. We matched late on a Thursday. He opened with something annoyingly clever, like, "What do you think about the word liminal?" I didn't know if it was a trap or just a hipster riddle, but I played along. He liked talking about abstract things, why people ghost, how time feels different after 2 a.m., whether love is a decision or a feeling. It was pretentious but interesting, like flirting with a college philosophy professor who also GAs on weekends. I wasn't even sure I liked him, but he was definitely different. We met for drinks a few days later. Some mart he picked that didn't have a name on the front door and served cocktails in mismatched mugs. He showed up in black jeans and an oversized coat, gave me a side hug, and launched into a story about how he once hitchhiked through Portugal. I smiled through it, trying to figure out if this was the kind of guy who was exhausting in a good way or just exhausting. The first hour was fine. He asked lots of questions, the kind that make you feel a little exposed but also kind of flattered, like he was trying to excavate your personality. What's your biggest fear that no one ever guesses? Or, if someone described you in one sentence, what would you hope they said? That kind of stuff. He listened closely, nodded slowly, and made you feel like whatever you said really mattered. I could see how people got hooked on him. There was something addictive about being seen that intensely. Then he asked me how many people I'd slept with. Not casually, not like it just slipped out. He leaned forward across the little candlelit table and said, "Can I ask you something kind of intimate?" I said, "Sure," assuming it was gonna be about past heartbreak or emotional triggers. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "What's your number?" I paused. Not because I was embarrassed, but because it came out of nowhere. I asked him why he wanted to know, and he said, "It just helps me understand compatibility," like it was a normal part of a date. I told him I didn't think that was the kind of question that needed to be answered unless we were actually building something serious. He said, "But how can I build something if I don't know who I'm building it with?" And I swear I almost choked on my drink. He said body count matters, that people's relationship with intimacy shapes how they treat others, that someone with a high number probably has a hard time with connection. I said that sounded more like judgment than insight, and he said, "It's not judgment. It's pattern recognition." I should have left right then, but I stayed, mostly because I wanted to see how much worse it could get. He went on about how he wasn't slut-shaming. He just had a data-driven mindset when it came to relationships. He said women who'd been with too many people often carried unresolved attachments, and that his ideal partner had intentional history, like we were talking about wine instead of people. I asked him what his number was, and he smiled like he'd been waiting for that question. Said it didn't matter because he'd done the work to heal and detach. That for men is more about how you engage, not how many. I almost laughed. He actually said the phrase spiritually cleared past lovers. I told him that if numbers didn't matter for him, they shouldn't matter for me either. He said, "It's different for women. There's more emotional weight," and I knew right then that I'd be telling this story later. I wrapped it up not long after that. Told him I had an early morning. He walked me to my car and said he hoped I didn't take the conversation the wrong way. That he appreciated my honesty, even though I hadn't actually answered his question. I nodded, said cool, and got in my car without looking back. The next day, he texted me a long paragraph thanking me for the energetic exchange. Said he hoped I took time to reflect on our conversation, and if I ever wanted to go deeper, he'd be open. I didn't reply. The part that still annoys me isn't the question. It's the way he framed it, like I was supposed to thank him for interrogating me under the guise of intimacy. Like he was doing me a favor by filtering me for emotional validity. As if he was the gatekeeper to some enlightened version of love that only people with the right ratio of heartbreak to hook up could access. He wasn't curious. He was calculating. Since then, I've made peace with the fact that some people don't want to connect with you. They want to measure you against a checklist and call it depth. They want vulnerability without being vulnerable. They want your story, as long as it fits their narrative. I'm not a number, and I'm not an energetic exchange. I'm a person, with messy pasts, soft edges, and more than enough clarity to know when someone's pretending to be profound just to disguise their insecurity. Daniel can keep his charts. I'll keep my peace. He had that kind of face you want to trust. Warm eyes, a calm smile, no sunglasses in every photo, which already put him ahead of most guys on Tinder. His bio was short, looking to settle down. Tired of games. That was it. Nothing too intense, nothing cryptic or overly poetic. Just straight to the point, like someone who knew what they wanted and wasn't into wasting time. It was refreshing, honestly. I've been stuck in this loop of talking to guys who wanted to see where things go for months. So when someone came in with actual intention, I was more than ready. We matched on a Wednesday, talked for a bit about music and dogs, and met up that weekend for brunch. He picked a place near the lake, casual but cute. He wore this soft green sweater and jeans, looked better in person than he did in his photos. And when he hugged me hello, he smelled like fresh laundry and just a little bit of cedarwood. It was all very wholesome. The conversation was easy. We talked of our childhoods, travel dreams, and both admitted to being the therapist friend in our circles. He said he was looking for something serious because he'd already done the casual thing and it left him feeling empty. Said he was at a point where he wanted a real connection, consistency, something that felt like home. I was nodding along like, yep, me too. This is exactly what I want. We started seeing each other regularly. Coffee on lazy mornings, late night walks after dinner, swapping playlists and watching movies under blankets. He'd text me good morning and check in on my day, not just once, but consistently. It was the kind of consistency that makes you exhale. Like, finally, here's someone who isn't afraid of showing up. He said all the right things. That I was easy to be around, that he felt calm when he was with me, that he could see this going somewhere, that I had a main character energy. He'd make plans in advance. He'd open doors and remember tiny things I'd said in passing. One night, he told me he deleted his dating apps and didn't feel the need to look anywhere else. I hadn't even brought it up. He just said it like it was obvious. Around week 4, I started to get that settled feeling. That quiet hum in your chest where you think, maybe this is actually going to work. And then it happened. It was a Thursday night, and I was out with my friend Mia at this rooftop bar she liked. We were halfway through our second round of overpriced cocktails when she squinted at a guy across the patio and went, "Wait, is that your Ryan?" I turned around. It was him. Laughing, arms slung around a girl in a white crop top. Drink in hand, totally relaxed like he hadn't just told me 2 days ago. He was exclusively focused on building something real. I froze. Mia was already in detective mode. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Within 30 seconds, she found it. A post from a mutual friend of hers who worked at the same office as one of the guys Ryan was with. It was a group photo captioned, "Boys Bet Night. Winner gets bragging rights and bottle service." And just like that, the whole thing unraveled. Apparently, the boys had made a bet. Who could hook up with the most girls in a month? A throwback to their college frat energy. Each of them was trying a different strategy. One guy was going full gym bro. One was pretending to be super shy. And Ryan, sweet, consistent, wholesome Ryan, was playing the "I'm looking for something serious" card. Mia showed me the comments under the post, and there he was. Ryan. Laugh reacting to a comment about how simping gets you the numbers faster. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I didn't say anything that night. Just left quietly, told him I wasn't feeling well when he texted asking what I was up to. But I couldn't sit with it. The next morning I called him. He picked up, sounding all bright and chipper like he wasn't actively living a double life. I didn't waste time. Just asked him straight up, "Are you part of some hookup bet with your friends?" The silence on the line was so loud. And he sighed and said, "Okay, yeah, but," and tried to go into some half-baked explanation about how it started as a joke, and he didn't mean to hurt anyone, and how he actually did like me, that he just didn't know how to back out once things with me started feeling real. He said I was different, that he wasn't even counting me toward the score, like that was supposed to make it better. I hung up. Blocked his number. Deleted the playlists. Threw out the little note he'd written me after our second date. And then I sat on my bed, staring at the wall, not even mad, just tired. Tired of people who perform love like it's a script. Who say what they think you want to hear and wear whatever mask helps them win whatever game they're playing. It wasn't just that he lied. It was that he made me feel safe before pulling the rug out, like he built me a house and then lit it on fire just to prove he could. I learned something that month. That consistency without sincerity is just manipulation in disguise. That some people will study your wants like a cheat sheet and use them to win, not love. And that sometimes the sweetest talkers are the ones with the most to hide. Now, whenever someone says they're tired of games, I wait, not because I'm jaded, but because I know that line is easy to say and a lot harder to live by. Ryan didn't want a relationship. He wanted a win. And it was just a point on a scoreboard he'll forget by next weekend. He went by Chase, and even that name felt like a red flag in hindsight. Too smooth, too curated. His profile gave off shield creative with a minor god complex energy. Clean photos, artsy angles, one shot of him reading in a hammock, another at pottery wheel like he just casually picked up ceramics between journal entries. His bio said, "Working on becoming the best version of myself, want to watch," which should have made me run the other way, but I was in a mood. A little lonely, a little bored, and tired of conversations that went nowhere. Our chats were different, though. He didn't open with "wide" or "you're cute." He said, "Tell me something true that sounds fake." I sent a voice note about how I used to sleepwalk into the pantry as a kid and eat uncooked rice. He sent one back about how he didn't learn how to ride a bike until he was 19. We had that weird little rhythm you get with people who make you feel a little smarter when you talk to them. We decided to meet up after a few days of texting. He picked a little cafe near our park, said it had good emotional feng shui. I didn't know what that meant, but I agreed. I showed up a couple minutes early and sat at a corner table outside. A minute later, I saw him approaching. Tall, casual, wearing a denim jacket with a patch that said, "Feelings First." Behind him was another person. At first, I thought maybe he ran into a friend and they were saying goodbye. But no, they both walked right up to the table. Chase smiled, sat down, and introduced the woman behind him. "This is Nadia," he said. "She's my therapist. She'll be observing." I blinked. Nadia gave me a polite nod and sat down across from me, pulling out a little notepad and a thermos. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. He said, "I probably should mention this, but I've been doing a series of therapeutic exposures around intimacy and vulnerability. I thought it would be interesting to have professional insight into how I show up emotionally on first dates." I said, "Wait, so this is like a live session, and I'm part of it?" He nodded, sipping his tea like he hadn't just completely detonated the definition of a normal date. "Only if you're comfortable," he added way too casually. "But I thought you'd be open-minded. You seem really emotionally curious." I sat there trying to figure out if this was some elaborate joke or performance art. Nadia, to her credit, looked completely unbothered. She had the vibe of someone who had done this before. Calm, detached, like she was watching a documentary and not two people awkwardly sharing a croissant. I asked, "So, what exactly are you doing here?" Nadia said, "I'm not participating. I'm observing and taking notes. Chase and I will debrief later." I looked at Chase. He smiled. "It's about awareness. I tend to perform a lot on dates. I get caught in patterns, oversharing, trying too hard to be liked, abandoning my needs for approval. Having a witness helps me stay grounded." I didn't even know what to say. My brain was doing the math. This man had brought his literal therapist to our first date so she could give him feedback on how he emotionally presented himself. And I was supposed to just vibe with that. For some reason, I didn't leave. I think it was part shock, part morbid curiosity. I wanted to see where this would go. I sat through that entire coffee date with a therapist across the table like a dating referee. Every time I said something, I could feel Nadia's invisible pen scribbling something down. Every time Chase responded with what felt like a perfectly timed affirmation. "Thank you for sharing that. I really feel the weight of that experience. I wondered if it was real or just part of his growth arc." We talked about art, attachment styles, the ethics of self-care. He asked deep questions, of course. Stuff like, when was the last time you felt fully understood? And do you ever hide joy because you think people won't take you seriously? Every time I answered, he'd nod slowly, then glance at Nadia like a student waiting for the teacher's silent approval. At one point, I asked if he ever just dated like a normal person. He smiled. "What even is normal?" I said, "Not bringing a licensed professional to emotionally audit your lot of choices." He laughed. Nadia wrote something down. The date lasted about an hour. I was exhausted by the end of it. Not because it was intense or dramatic, but because it felt like being part of someone else's self-improvement documentary. I didn't feel like a date. I felt like a case study. Like I'd been cast in the role of emotionally intelligent female subject number 3 for his therapy homework. When we stood up to leave, Nadia thanked me for being open. Chase hugged me like we'd just survived something together. He said, "This was really illuminating. I feel like I actually stayed present." I nodded politely, still not sure if I'd hallucinated the entire thing. He texted me the next day. Said Nadia had shared some great insights. that you realized he had a tendency to mirror emotional tone instead of expressing authentic feeling, and that I had a soft strength he found grounding. Then he asked if I'd like to meet again, just the two of us this time. I never responded. It wasn't that I hated him. In fact, I kind of admired how deep he was willing to go, but I didn't sign up to be someone's emotional training ground. I don't want to date someone who needs a third-party analyst just to figure out if he's being genuine. I want someone who's done enough work to leave the therapist at home. Dating's already hard enough without having to look someone in the eye and wonder if their feelings are being filtered through someone else's clipboard. I don't need perfection. I don't even need someone fully healed. But I do need to feel like I'm connecting with the actual person in front of me, not someone trying to pass a personal development midterm.